Alright, well this is a little recap because either I lost some video footage or else I didn't get it shot. I don't remember which, but anyway, working on the fifth bearing again. This is the second casting that I did. The other casting I'd started working on, and I think I left it off the bench where I was getting ready to start machining it. Since then, I went ahead and I leveled this surface on the mill table. We drilled a couple of holes down where the bearing's actually going to fit, so that'll all be machined away. All those were tooling holes so that I could bolt it down directly to the mill table. And we leveled this, made sure we had clearance on this end to machine that away, and just basically picked our level position on the mill table so that we could deck this surface off, because this is what mounts on the front of the motor. So fly cut this off. Once this was fly cut, this became my reference surface. Once I decked off this surface, I took this template that I had built off of an original front cover, which we're not using, of course, because it doesn't accommodate a fifth bearing. We mounted this onto the back of our casting, and we went ahead and drilled our holes. And I just drilled them 1/4 inch, and that's what my template's set up to do, just so it's there. And then we put in our dowel pin holes, and those are a undersized hole, but that references where that, or approximately where that goes. So while it was bolted down that way and level, went ahead and drilled those. Once that was done, why, it was ready to flip over and bolt to the mill table this way and machine our flats where our mounting bolts were going to go, like the original was, and it would be ready to bore this, but we don't have that dimension yet. So I'm going to set that up on the machine, and then we'll center it off of the, or we're going to set it up on a block, and then we'll mark the inside off of the bore of the crankshaft, or the center line of the crankshaft. So that way we'll actually mark it from the back side, and we'll pilot it there. Then we'll probably mount it back down onto the mill table, machine out most of this surface with a fly cutter, then mount it in the line board. What I've done is we've already decked off the back. We just set that up with a fly cutter. That's what these holes are, is just tooling holes to clamp it down to the table. And we had to move this, of course. I don't have quite the capacity on this little mill drill to completely deck this off with the fly cutter that I had. So anyway, we've drilled our holes, we've got all our positions, and they're just a 1/4 inch hole with the exception of these 2 holes, which will be reamed holes, and we'll fit them up later. What I'm going to do for right now is I'm just going to clamp it back down to the table in this whatever orientation it is to line up each hole, and I'm going to do this individually. I'm not going to clamp it with the idea set. I'm pretty well indexed, so I can go ahead and drill right on through, and I'll be in a T-slot and not into my table. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll take each individual hole, and for now, and we'll be more precision with the actual products that we use when we do set up the actual fifth bearing that's going on our motor. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to center these off of a drill bit just to get them positioned pretty close to where they're supposed to be. I'm going to go ahead and clamp them down, and then we'll go ahead, open them up, and I'm using, say, 13-30 seconds is what the hole size is that I'm going to put in here. And I kind of took a variation of what fits in. It's bigger than 3/8, and part of the holes are bigger, part of them are smaller. And we want a little bit of movement in there. It's not going to make any difference because we want to align it. We want to be able to align off of our dowel pins that are going to do the final alignment for the fifth bearing assembly itself. So we're going to go ahead and open these up, and then we're just going to take a 3/4 inch center cutting end mill, and we'll go ahead and face off the top of these. There again, depth is not critical. We want them all to be the same. There's a couple of them that are a different height, which is, I believe, this one and this one. I'll look before we actually do them. But we're going to go ahead, just index them up, and get that part of them done. And that way we'll be pretty well set to go ahead and set it up on a block. Then we'll go ahead and align it with our pins and get them locked down, and then we can go ahead and do the final fit for everything here. We'll lightly clamp these down. I'm probably on the wrong side of the table to get a good view of this operation. I'm not being super precision on this one. This is just a prototype. We're not going to use this on the flight engine, but it will be a proof of concept for the machining process. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and zero it out there for each hole. Lock our table in. And what we'll do for this setup for our 3/4 inch, so we're consistent across, so we don't have to measure heights on each one of these, is I'll go ahead and run it all the way up into the collet. We'll lock it down there again. When we do the actual, we'll change them a little bit. But that will give us consistency enough to where we can set our depths on these. May or may not be right for a zero, or for a depth, but we'll try them and see. As long as they come out consistent, we'll adjust what we want for depth, and so we get maximum thread engagements on the bolts. We use to bolt the front back on again. Well, that's all there is to the first one. We'll unbolt it and take a look at it here so we can see it. And there's our first one, right like that. I'm going to go ahead and leave the, yeah, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and leave the camera run, and we'll just fast forward through all of these. There's this, and you see in each one. I'll try and move it over so you've got a better view on it. It's actually out of position for me to be able to see it well, but that's all right. We'll see if we can't move around to where you've got a little better view of what's going on here. Now the holes are all machined and countersunk to where I think they need to be, and we'll make some changes as we go along. There again, proof of concept, so I expected to make changes. Let me clean these up. So here's what we ended up with on the prototype. And there again, tooling holes here. We're going to bore some of this out to get this crap out of the way a little bit. But anyway, what we've done is we've drilled these to final size, which is 13/32. I believe that's going to be final size. It looks like that'll fit. And we've counterbored them, and just to give us a deck surface for that's consistent for our bolts to tighten down on, and our washers. And like I said before, we'll go to a bigger end mill on this to do this, and we'll deck it. And now we can make some changes to this pattern too. Now these holes, these mounting holes, are all the same depth with the exception of this one, and it sits up on a little bit of a boss. It's a 1/4 inch taller than these holes are. So we'll adjust that to where it needs to be. We'll decide if that's the proper depth of them when we fit it up to a block. Now the only thing left to do as far as these holes is we've got the 2 dowel pin holes, which are here and here, and we'll I'm going to go ahead and set it bolted into position, and we'll fixture it some way or another to where I can ream those holes to match, so that they'll match into the block. And we'll probably go to a thousandths over what was in there for dowel pin holes, just for alignment, and so it's tight all the way around, so it's consistent to where it bolts back up. But anyway, that's the machining done. I went ahead and just ran these bosses together. This one I didn't bother to line it up when we do the original. If we cut them across like that, why we will make sure we've got a good smooth transition there. But this shows me that I've got a little more material in through here than I need to have. I'll go back and adjust my pattern a little bit. Same way through here, so we don't have such a giant step on all of those. So we'll cut this pattern back a little bit before we cast the next ones, and see how it goes. But next thing is to bolt it up to a block and see how well it fits there, and make sure our bolts are going to line up there. So anyway, it's taken us just under an hour to do that. We're going to set her in place and see if she'll bolt up. All we want to do is check alignment on this, basically, to make sure we're relatively well lined up here. We've got clearance for all our holes. And we'll go to a socket head cap screw to take probably an Allen head, and then we can drill and safety wire them on. So that will line our bearing up. We'll go ahead and put our alignment studs in to make that be where it's supposed to be, so we can ream those and get those back installed. And then what we'll do is we'll probably leave it bolted to this block. We'll have to deck off this edge so it matches flush. We'll do that in the mill. We've got enough clearance in the mill. We've got to drill our oil hole, drill and tap for our oil line going into the side, and then we'll be to boring the center. So we'll have to build a boring bar for that. But we'll just put an old set of bearings in, and we'll build us a boring bar, just like you would line bore anything else, and we'll bore right on through, and I think that will work quite well. We'll change our pattern a little bit before we cast up our final bearing, and we'll probably do a couple of castings just so we've got while we're doing, if everything's working right. But we'll change that casting around a little bit. We can machine this down so it's flush, or we can change the casting so it comes down to where it's flush. All in all, that looks like a pretty good setup. I'll have to do a few modifications to it. Like I say, we'll take quite a bit more care when we machine up the ones we're actually going to use. But for quick and dirty prototyping, why, this will tell us any changes we need to make. So anyway, that's where we're going to leave it for right now. If you find these videos helpful, if you haven't already, you might want to hit that subscribe button. If you hit the bell notification, you'll know when I put out a new video. And any comments or suggestions, leave them in the comment section for me below. And thanks for taking the time to watch, guys. I really appreciate it.